So this is a tough story, and I have to follow up on it because it plays a lot into what I cover, working for the Big 12 and calling college football and basketball for the Big 12 for ESPN. The Jake Retzlaff situation continues to play out in the court of public opinion, but it won't play out in court, right, for another year at least. Well, we're 95 days away from BYU playing their first game against Portland State. And when you think about the strength of BYU as a school, as a program, and the moral high ground that they try to work, they really are trying to do the right thing by the university, the right thing by the student athlete. There's also a particular set of circumstances that athletes agree to, the honor code, when they go to play at BYU, that factor in. And this thing with Jake Retzlaff is a mess. Why is it a mess? Well, it's sad because it involves a young woman who has put these allegations forward. And it's also sad because, the police have said we can't, there's not enough evidence to investigate, but it's certainly a civil suit is something that you do investigate, or they're going to investigate. That's what this is. And a civil suit, by the way, is not as hard to prove, right? I'm not an attorney, but just talking to attorneys and knowing a little sliver about law and honestly just reading a lot about this case. A civil suit is not as hard to prove. It's not like proving a case in regular court. See, there you go, my lack of law skills. But it's not quite as hard to prove. But BYU has a ton of resources, right? All over the country, but certainly in that area. And you can bet, Brian Santiago, their new athletic director, who sent out an email last night to everyone, and in that email, he did not reference Jake Retzlaff, and I want to pull up a quote, but he did talk about the honor code. Remember, Santiago was just named athletic director less than 2 weeks ago. But he says, look, hey, through it all, our commitment is clear. We will strive for excellence, but we will do it the right way, the BYU way, okay? We will succeed as an athletics program precisely because of our alignment with BYU's mission and values. Well, I mean, if even half of this Jake Retzlaff accusation is true, we're talking about an honor code violation. And time is of the essence for BYU. And I have a couple things here, just feelings I have from following BYU and knowing about the Big 12, and also seeing we're in a brand new space here with everyone across the landscape of college sports. And BYU has been extremely successful in that new landscape. Why? Well, you could say Kalani Sitake and Kevin Young, and the fact that their basketball and football programs have been close to elite. I mean, 11-2 last year, BYU's football team went. Surprised a lot of people, nevertheless, kicked a lot of ass. Same thing with BYU basketball, right? Sweet 16 last year. You look at the players they're bringing in, high-profile recruits who command the resources and the finances. The school and the church are making that work, right? And also the supporters of BYU athletics. I'm not saying it's just the church or anything, but there's a lot of momentum behind this right now. The issue with Jake Retzlaff is it violates what BYU is all about if this is true, right? But in today's day and age, in today's sports, and the type of athlete, and I'm not saying great athletes can't be great young men and can't follow honor codes or can't follow certain rules, but it's a precursor. And Gordon Monson wrote a great column today in the Salt Lake City Tribune, or the Salt Lake Tribune. He's a great columnist, and I try to read most of his stuff. This was must read this morning because he talks about, the allegations against Jake Retzlaff and how that puts BYU at a bit of a crossroads here. And the reason it puts the school at a crossroads is because this is almost like a test case, right? You are now, BYU as you look at the quarterbacks from BYU, even back from when I was a kid. I mean, just all the way back to Mark Wilson, right? Who was a great Raider quarterback, or good enough. I know Al Davis loved him because he had a cannon. Robbie Bosco, Steve Young, Jim McMahon, Ty Detmer, Steve Sarkisian. Sark, right? So, I even got Zach to look up after that. You know, there's a long line of really good BYU quarterbacks, okay? But when you look at some of the athletes they're bringing in basketball-wise, and just some of the next level recruits, this is something that they could run into again. And I'm not saying that there'll be any amendment made to the BYU Honor Code or how it's enforced, but this situation could be a precursor of what's to come with the new landscape of college sports, specifically for a school like BYU, who doesn't have the wiggle room, per se, behavior-wise, that other athletic programs have. However, they still have found a way within the body of that honor code to operate as a very high-functioning and successful athletic department. This is a new day and age for BYU. I know they'll figure it out. I don't think this is by any means like a situation that they won't figure out and won't breeze right through. Here's another theory I have. Jake Retzlaff, by the way, could still end up playing this year. That decision will have to be made, and it talks about this a little bit in Gordon Monson's column. The BYU will have to make that decision sooner than later, which brings, and definitely before this case goes to any kind of civil court. Well, one piece of good news is, and this is what I mentioned about BYU and their resources all over the country and in Salt Lake, you can bet that they've got a team of people who are very qualified to figure out exactly what went on in this situation. And when they figure out what went on in that situation, they will make a decision based on that. And this is an athletic department that is not afraid of making a decision that would be unpopular as long as it is aligned with their moral values, right? And their true belief as to what they know is right and wrong. If they find out that this civil allegation holds up and it's legitimate, Jake Retzlaff will not play for BYU. If they find out that he's innocent, right, and they do more investigating and figure out how their honor code was or was not broken, they'll move forward from there with the decision on the future of the program. I don't really worry about their decision-making process and how they'll do it. I honestly feel better about BYU and their athletic department and an ability to manage a situation like this more so than any other program, or many other programs, I should say. I think being here in Central Texas, Baylor is another one that would do a tremendous job of figuring this out. But I will say the difference between Baylor and BYU is BYU has better resources around the state, right, of Utah, where they can find out what's going on here. I mean, Baylor being a private school, I know BYU's too, but it's different. Like, Baylor doesn't have the reach that a BYU does. So they're going to get to the bottom of this, right? And they're going to figure it out. Well, if they figure out that Jake Retzlaff can't play, and by the way, I don't mean to seem callous about this situation. Again, it's a sad deal, right? That we're talking about this. And it's so difficult to navigate. But when you look at being 95 days away from the college football season, you start to think about, okay, September or August 30th against Portland State, what's going to happen? Well, I can tell you what probably will happen. BYU is going to take the field, and they're going to beat up on Portland State. And Jake Retzlaff might not be the quarterback, but that does not mean that BYU will not have a very good football team. Jay Hill's defense has gotten better in the offseason. BYU has a bevy of talented young quarterbacks, Bear Brockmeyer being one of them, just transferring him from Stanford. Last year, if you look at the numbers, Jake Retzlaff threw as many interceptions, 12, just as many as any other starting quarterback in the Big 12. His quarterback efficiency rating was 8th. We're not talking about a guy who won the Heisman Trophy. Yes, there was a leadership and an aura around Jake Retzlaff that was magical to watch. And they found a way to win games thanks to his leadership a lot of times. Like, the ball was bouncing the Cougars' way, and I think that had a lot to do with his leadership. It also had a lot to do with Kalani Sitake and the football program and the players that surround a guy like Jake Retzlaff. Is the quarterback position the most important in college football? It's the most important position in sports, not just college football, in all of sports. So you've got to have that situation figured out. And I do believe that we will have a decision, whatever that decision is, rather quickly. And I have faith, as somebody who follows the Big 12 and wants to see the conference flourish, I have faith that it's all going to work out. And I really hope, and I'm talking about logistically as far as BYU is concerned and the school is concerned. You know, there's people involved here, and to me, that's like, it makes my heart ache. It really does, which is why it's tough to talk about this stuff, but that's our job, right? In sports media. We've got to talk about this, and we've got to find a way to share it with you guys based on all the facts that we have. And the facts that I see here is that we are heading into a new, I mean, obviously, we all know we're heading into a new era here in college sports. BYU is positioned to do very well in that new era, but there will be some new wrinkles and some new adjustments they may have to make. And I'm not saying they're going to compromise their belief system. I'm just saying that they're bringing in some of the best athletes on the planet right now. And most schools, since the beginning of time, have made adjustments around those elite athletes. BYU won't do that, but how will they find a way? Look, Gordon Monson says it here in his you're not, like, to play at BYU, you don't have to be a card-carrying member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You can be a Catholic like me. You can be Jewish like Jake Retzlaff. You can be Protestant. You can be whatever. But there is a certain set of rules and guidelines and an honor code that you've got to get down with. It's a whole new frontier. So I wish everybody the best in the situation. But, the update is not there's no update. The update is we're going to have an update soon. And it could really play into how BYU goes forward with this whole thing, with the Jake Retzlaff thing, and with, you've got A.J. DeBonsa, one of the best basketball players, like I said, on the planet right now, who's getting ready to come play for you. And it's just it's interesting. They're recruiting the cream of the crop, and they're landing the cream of the crop. I'll be interested to see how things evolve, right, within that athletic department. But they're under the stewardship of Brian Santiago, and that's clearly he has got the right idea of how to manage BYU and their athletic department. He's been running around that university since he was 7 years old. He gets it. So nobody better to guide them through this situation.